Phase 2, developing strategy. It's where you want to go big picture and where you want to lead other people to go big picture. So in this situation, in this area, this phase, what you're going to be doing is pulling from all over ET. You're going to be pulling from forecasting and new product development, and alliances and innovation and competitive intelligence, and all of these are going to integrate it into where do you want to go. You're pulling the data together to think something through. Let's return back to that superintendent I talked about in the last series, where what I said was that the superintendent's desired outcome was to educate the youth so they'd be prepared for the world. Now just think about where you can go with that. You could start with preschool and work them all the way up through to having them go to college or university. Or what you could do is you could decide that you're going to give them skills that are more blue collar, because there's plenty of opportunity in the market for that, which you hadn't thought of before. By changing your desired outcome or finding the right desired outcome, the strategy then will meet that desired outcome. Think of it this way, a strategy a poor strategy, well executed, will never be as good as a good strategy, poorly executed. Now what that means is this, so you got to think about it for a minute. If you have a poor strategy and it's executed extremely well, you're going to end up with a disaster. You could have the wrong strategy and everything goes wrong. You do it well, but it's in the wrong direction. Or you can have a great strategy executed poorly. The odds are you're going to be closer in the direction that you should be going on. And what I advise people is or conceptual, to think about this. If you had a laser beam and you pointed it up to the moon and you were just an inch left or right, you will miss the moon. Well, same thing with the cyclonic strategic thinking model. What we're trying to do is keep ourselves on target the entire time so that when we execute eventually on these plans, they will get us to where we need to be. Now, in terms of pulling together pieces or information, you've got to resist the urge to jump forward. Take the time to develop that strategy. Make sure it's the direction that you really want to take the group. And I say that because I'm actually bringing you right back to the economics of thinking. The economics of thinking tells you that if you front load the beginning part of thinking something through, the odds are that the final outcome will be improved. So what we're doing is we're just forcing that model, or forcing you to think in that direction. Here's a great example. In the United States, there's something called the NTSB, the National Transportation and Safety Board. 50 years ago, they decided that their strategy was to reduce vehicular deaths and injuries, to stop deaths and injuries. Just recently, in the past decade, they determined that they were going to change their strategy, which is now to eliminate them from happening. Now imagine if 50 years ago they had said, let's not stop vehicular accidents, but what we should do is prevent it from ever happening in the first place. We wouldn't have airbags or side impact railings that we focused on. We would have focused on possibly skid-resistant surfaces. We would have focused on anti-collision technologies. It would have been a whole different world. And that's where coming up with the right strategy is extremely important. Jeff Bezos, when he founded Amazon, came up with 3. I've never met Jeff. However, when I heard them, I said, these are so spot on, it's amazing. The first one is obsess about the customer. Sounds pretty easy, doesn't it? But the strategy is, if we obsess about the customer all the time, then the tactics and the macro tactics we employ will get us there. And the second one is invent for the customer. So this means the first 2 are all about the customer. So when they're making decisions at Amazon, even though you've never met anybody at Amazon, their technologies that they employ, the way they work, is to deliver you a great experience. And the last one that he has is invest in long-term solutions. And what does that mean is he is willing to wait 5 to 7 years for the return on investment. Many large companies, organizations won't do that. They want a high, fast ROI, return on investment. And he's willing to give it that time. And by doing so, he's willing to allow ideas that might not pass the test in other organizations to work within Amazon. So let's go back to this going on vacation scenario. Now remember I said in the last video that by saying we're going on vacation, we've already determined our strategy. So we're going to play along with this game. Our desired outcome is now an experience with our family, and we've said that we want to go on vacation. We want to go someplace. And so now what we've done is we've chosen the direction. It is to go on vacation. Now, can you do it yet? No. Do we have any details? No. Do we know we're staying in a 3-star, 5-star hotel? No. We don't have any of those details. What we know is we're going to be looking forward into our macro tactics of picking the direction, the place that we want to go and how we want to do that. And then if you take the cyclonic strategic component of that and you give yourself some time to think, you'll come up with new ideas on how to make this holiday vacation a better experience for you, your family, the group that you're going on. So it's very important that you pick the right strategy. It's ironic, or I don't know if the word term is ironic, it's amazing how many organizations believe they can go on a 2-day retreat or a 1-day retreat and determine strategy, or actually develop plans. It is a long-term ordeal for anybody. Going in one day, going to figure out everything, you can develop pieces of it, but not the whole thing. And I distinctly remember an experience. I was working with this German company. They do about $300 million US. And I was sitting in a group setting where the CEO had brought me in to hear how they were thinking so we could start talking about next projects. And I guess they had read one of these great books that are out there, and halfway during the day, one of the CFO says, when are we going to stop talking and we're going to start doing something? I said, wait a moment. The doing, for a leader, where you're paid to think, the doing is the exercise we're going through today. It wasn't my project. I wasn't running it, but it was hard to believe this CFO was so entrained. I guess he read the books, execution. He didn't realize that in the role of leading and managing, the execution is the sitting down and figuring out what to do. So in this strategy section, phase 2, you're going to be deciding on strategy. And that may change as you work through some of the ideas you come up with, and you might change your strategy. Sports teams do this all the time. Actually, I'll bring one in right now before I end, because I thought it was a brilliant exercise. In the newspaper one day, I'm reading this article about sports teams, and they talked about how the U.S. Soccer football team, and I say soccer football depending on where you are in the world, had changed their strategy. For years upon years, it was that they would play football the way, or soccer, the way everybody else in the world did. And they hired a coach out of Europe who ended up bringing in some players from Europe. And he said, when I'm looking at this team, we're playing the way the rest of the world plays. And Americans are in your face approach to living. It might not be completely correct, but it's an assumption around the world, or a belief around the world. And what he did is he changed his strategy. He said, we're going to go on the attack as Americans. And for the World Cup this past year, Americans did better than they had done in the past. And part of it was they changed their strategy. Instead of sitting back and letting people come to them, they went out and they pushed their team up actually into the field. So they no longer were bringing their fullbacks or their backfield back. They were actually much more aggressive and playing the way the personality of the American culture seems to be perceived. And it ends up working for them. So this is a great little section that I'd like you to slow down on and spend the time on how to, what is your strategy? So let's go on to the next one.